You know, they say that the world around us is filled with monsters and tales of horror, but what exactly are those monsters and those tales? Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to look at the urban legend Iceberg. This iceberg covers many different urban legends, probably some that you've heard of like Slenderman, Bigfoot, Bloody Mary, but also some other more obscure and frightening ones. The iceberg that we're covering today was made by Jimbo Seth and has 10 different levels on it, starting at the top with some more well-known stories, but then going slowly downwards into things that are probably a little bit more unknown and a lot more disturbing. These are always really interesting stories. I mean, we all know that they're not real, but in a weird way, they always make life more interesting. And today, well, you probably get to learn about some new ones. So stick around and enjoy. So first we're going to start with tier 1. Now this is the top tier, we're not even in the water yet. These are a lot more common stories that you probably already heard of. Nothing too strange here, and most of these have, well, they're probably not really real, but they're interesting nonetheless. As we go through these tiers, I'm going to talk about each entry, give you a little bit of an explanation, and then also let you know if this is real or not, at least to the best of my knowledge. So for the first entry, we're going to talk about the black-eyed children. So this legend is a little bit strange. It essentially revolves around small children with black eyes and pale skin that usually appear at people's houses at night. They usually appear when someone's alone, and they usually show up at your doorstep. They have monotone voices and they're not known to breathe either. Once they arrive at someone's house, they usually ask if they can use the bathroom, make a phone call, or just come inside. People that meet these children usually get pretty frightened, especially because of their black eyes and strange appearance. A lot of people out there have suspected that these might be ghosts or interdimensional beings, aliens, and things of that sort. Some people even think that these might be people of a demonic background. Are these supernatural entities, or is there something else going on here? Well, apparently the origins of this actually go into the late 1990s, and this is actually from an email thread that was started by someone named Brian Bethel. Brian would write about an encounter that he had with these black-eyed children outside a movie theater in Albany, Texas. He would also mention that someone else had a similar encounter in Portland, Oregon. Unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like there's really any other sources for this story, just really one person that it all goes back to. There isn't really any evidence to prove that these children exist. There's never really been an official investigation or anything else. Also, when you think about it, in today's world of phones and the internet, I mean, someone would have certainly gotten a video or something about it. And I definitely think we would have seen a lot more people talking about it online. But overall, this urban legend is pretty unknown. In fact, I had never even heard of it before making this video. So I think it's safe to say that this urban legend is, well, it's not true. But it would be kind of interesting if it was real. For our next entry, we're going to talk about cow tipping. So cow tipping is definitely a strange urban legend. The idea is that if you go up to a cow that is standing upright but asleep, you can essentially tip it over by pushing it. Apparently there's stories that people like to do this in rural areas because I guess there's not much else to keep them entertained. This urban legend is actually pretty well known on the internet and has actually been spread around a lot. In fact, when I was a kid, there was a movie that I saw, Cars, and in that movie there's a character named McQueen and Mater who actually go around tipping tractors. Now tractors in that universe are supposed to be cows, so it's essentially the same idea. Now the fact that this is being mentioned in Pixar movies, I think this kind of gives you an idea of how well known this legend is. But again, the question is this real? Unfortunately, just like the urban legend before, there isn't really any evidence to prove this. Again, if this was possible, we probably would have seen pictures and videos, but again, none of that really exists. Also, it's important to know that cows are extremely heavy. Even when they're standing, it will still be very difficult to push them over. A 1,400-pound large cow isn't just going to fall over because you give it a push. Also, cows that sleep upright are usually light sleepers, so even if you give them a small tug, they're probably going to wake up very quickly. So this legend isn't true. In fact, if it was true, the real legend would actually be the person pushing the cow. Heck, it might actually be easy to push your mama over. The next entry is Slenderman. The Slenderman is a fictional supernatural entity that is known to stalk, abduct, and traumatize people, especially children. He can usually be spotted in photographs wearing a black business suit with a slender build, hence the name, and has a blank face with no features. Now Slenderman is actually probably one of the more popular urban legends out there, considering the fact that it's had movies, video games, stories, and even real-life horrors based around it. Slenderman was originally created on June 10th, 2009 on a thread in the Something Awful forums. It was created by someone named Eric Knudsen as part of a Photoshop contest. Eric Knudsen would submit 2 pictures that contained groups of children in which he added the Slenderman in the background. These images would go viral and spread throughout the internet, and Slenderman would go on to become a pop culture icon. Though the Slenderman is fake, and we know that it's fake because the person who made it well, we know who he is. Slenderman has gone on to inspire real-life horrors, with people actually committing horrific acts in his name. Particularly on May 31st, 2014, two 12-year-old girls, Anissa Wire and Morgan Geyser, would invite their friend Peyton into the forest for a game of hide and seek. However, their real intentions were quite nefarious. They would stab Peyton 19 times in order to appease the Slenderman. Luckily, Peyton herself would actually survive, and the two other girls would be arrested. They weren't found guilty, but they were put into a mental institution. Turns out that Morgan, one of the girls who committed this act, actually had a history of mental health issues and had been suffering from hallucinations before in her life. The FBI would go on to state that the internet had become a black hole with the ability to expose children to a more sinister world. So again, this urban legend itself isn't real. However, it has caused real-life horror. For the next one, we have Bigfoot. Bigfoot, sometimes known as a Sasquatch, is a big ape-like creature that's suspected to be living in the forest of North America. This is another very famous urban legend, especially if you're from the United States or Canada, because that's where most of the sightings usually happen. Many different individuals and groups have claimed to actually seen Bigfoot, whether it was when they were out in the forest, or maybe they just lived in a rural area and all of a sudden Bigfoot rolled up on them. Now, Bigfoot encounters are usually pretty rare, but when they do happen, there have been some cases of violence and hostility on the part of Bigfoot. But it seems that most of the time, he seems to want to leave everyone alone. The most famous account comes from the Patterson-Gilman film, in which Bigfoot can be seen walking through a forest. However, this film has been greatly criticized, and the Bigfoot seen in this film has never been spotted since. Also, it's important to note that there's never been any skeletons or bodies or really any clear pictures. That's also one of the strange things about a lot of these urban legends, is that anytime someone does get a video or a picture, it's always like the most grainiest, unclear thing out there. Now, Bigfoot is, well, he's pretty big. Pretty big to the point where it's been highly commercialized. We're talking TV shows, documentaries, movies, video games, t-shirts, you name it. Though despite all this media, all this effort that's put into hunting him, he's never really been found, and no evidence whatsoever has been acquired. Just like before, this is nothing but an urban legend. The next urban legend is a home intruder poses as a clown statue. So this tale usually involves a babysitter coming over to take care of someone's kids. She's usually alone with about 2 kids that are already upstairs sleeping, and she's really the only person awake. Once the parents leave, they usually realize that they actually didn't give their cell phone number to the babysitter. So they usually call her and then give them their number so in case she ever has to get in touch with them. While they're having this phone call, the babysitter asks the parents if she can go into their bedroom and watch their TV. The parents usually agree, but once she's in the bedroom, she notices a strange clown statue in the corner of the room. She lets the parents know about this. She asks them if she can cover it up because it's kind of disturbing her a little bit. At this point, the parents become very nervous. They tell the babysitter to get out of there immediately and take the children with her, because they don't have a clown statue. Now at this point, there's usually a lot of different variations of what happens after. There's variations where the girl escapes with the children, she makes it out safely and the police arrest the clown who turns out to be some sort of a mass murderer. There's other variations where the babysitter dies or the children die or, a bunch of different stuff like that. This story first appeared in the early 2000s, and it doesn't really seem to be based on any real events. There aren't really any cases of murderers that dress up as clowns. There was a serial killer known as John Wayne Gacy who dressed as a clown. Now, he didn't really dress as a clown while he was killing people. He usually dressed as a clown because apparently he had some sort of a side job entertaining children at parties. Now again, the whole idea of an evil clown is a pretty big cliche. Whether it's the Joker from Batman or Pennywise the dancing clown from It. There's really no evidence really to back this up. It seems like this is just a story that exists in pop culture. So again, this urban legend isn't true. For our next urban legend, we have the Devil's Tower. Now, I wasn't 100% sure what they meant by Devil's Tower. There are many different places that share this name. However, for mine, I was able to find this one particular example that I actually found very interesting, and I thought it might be interesting for you guys to hear about it. The Devil's Tower is a butte composed of igneous rock. I think that's how you say it, I'm not exactly sure, in the Black Hills region of Wyoming. Again, I wasn't 100% sure if this is the proper tower, but this is a pretty interesting tale. According to many different Native American tribes in the region, there's actually an interesting story about how this formation came to be. Apparently a long time ago, there were 2 girls playing near this area, but they were spotted by a bunch of bears who came after them. They tried to run away, but unfortunately they just weren't fast enough. But before being killed, they would pray and hope for divine intervention. At that point, the whole rock under them would rise up into the sky. The bears would actually try climbing after them, and their claws actually ended up making the markings that exist on the tower today, or at least as is told. The girls themselves would keep rising into the sky and would eventually become stars. The Different tribes have slightly different variations of this story, but overall, it usually involves the same thing. Someone escaping from danger, the rock being created by a divine intervention, and the person eventually surviving the bear attack. Again, I thought this story was pretty interesting, so I thought I'd share it. Again, I'm not sure if this is the right Devil's Tower, but it's pretty interesting nonetheless. However, the name Devil's Tower itself was actually coined by Colonel Richard Dodge, who was a part of the US Army, and he had actually led an expedition into the area in the late 1800s. Again, this urban legend is mostly just a mythical tale, so like most urban legends before it, it's not really real either. For the next one, we have Jeff the Killer. Oh boy, Jeff the Killer. Now this is actually a pretty infamous creepypasta. If you've ever been on the internet or you ever read these sort of stories, you probably heard of Jeff the Killer, or at least you've probably seen this image. This image has always been one of the weirdest things on the internet, a weird, disformed person. Now if you don't know about this urban legend, it's actually been around for quite a while. It was actually created in 2008 by a user named Saucer on Encyclopedia Dramatica. The story revolves around a character Jeff, who's a 13-year-old and becomes a serial killer after he is disfigured after being attacked by a group of bullies. He eventually wakes up at the hospital after this attack and realizes that his face is completely messed up. He starts to laugh hysterically and apparently isn't really too disappointed. The doctor kind of thinks that he's being a little bit weird, but lets him leave home because he thinks this might be a side effect of the pain pills he gave him. Once at home, he actually uses a knife to carve a permanent smile into his face so that he never has to try to smile ever again. Again, very Joker-esque themes here. Just like in the old Batman film, just like the real life Joker, he gets disfigured, the surgeon can't really fix him up properly, he starts to laugh, goes a little bit crazy, and then eventually uses a knife to carve a smile into his face. Honestly, I wouldn't really be surprised if this was a little bit plagiarized. However, once he carves a smile, his mother actually sees what he's doing and thinks that their son is completely insane. She actually ends up going up to his dad and telling him that they need to kill their son. Again, quite a leap, quite a jump. You think that there might be some other things you might try first, but that's what they decide to do. However, before they can do anything, Jeff actually kills his parents and his brother. And this is where his serial killer streak officially begins. Today, Jeff the Killer is widely considered to be one of the worst creepypastas out there, and it's mostly just the image that keeps people interested. Pale skin with no eyebrows, long black hair with white eyes and black pupils with iris clearly missing. Many have actually tried to find the origins of this image, but no one has been lucky as of yet. This image is quite disturbing, and it seems to always attract people's attention. Again, this urban legend is not real. We know it was made up, it's just a story. I'm not 100% sure where the original image comes from, but the urban legend itself is quite false. Honestly, the real horror here is the story itself. For our next urban legend, we have the Walt Disney's body is frozen. So there's actually a story out there that Walt Disney actually had his body frozen when he died in the 1960s. Apparently he was suffering a lot of health problems, and the idea was that he would freeze his body, and then in the future when the medical technology had expanded, he would be unfrozen and his ailments would be cured and he would be able to continue on living. Apparently, the Disney Corporation is currently hiding his body at actually one of the theme parks, apparently under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. I'm not exactly sure why it's under that ride. Personally, myself, I probably would have put him into the Hollywood Tower of Terror, or I think it's some sort of a Guardians ride now. Though the idea of cryogenic technology was popular at the time of the 60s and was being researched and developed, there's really no evidence that Disney himself was ever really interested in the technology, or seriously considered to use it as a solution to his current problems. The legend itself wasn't actually made famous by Walt Disney. It actually became famous because of two biographies that were written about it, one by Leonard Mosley and another one by Mark Elliott. However, these two writers would really present no real evidence, and it's mostly just hearsay. In fact, there's more evidence to prove that his body actually wasn't frozen. His body was actually cremated, and there's even a plot in a gravesite for him. His death certificate actually shows that he was cremated, and that there's actually a grave for Disney in Glendale, California. Again, this is a pretty interesting urban legend. It's probably the most fascinating for me, but again, there's really no evidence to back it up. Like most tales before, it's just a little silly internet gossip. Or maybe that's just what the Freemasons and the Illuminati want you to think. I don't know. You tell me. Reptilians. So this conspiracy theory is actually one of the more famous ones out there. It's essentially a tale created by David Icke, a British conspiracy theorist who believes that the world is controlled by shape-shifting reptilians. Icke believes that high-ranking government officials, Hollywood stars, and many other people are actually shape-shifting reptilians, or are at least being controlled by them. Now this conspiracy theory about the reptilians is quite similar to many others that usually revolve around the idea of an individual or a group of people controlling the entire world. It's either reptilians or Freemasons, Illuminati, or Jews, or some other sort of group such as that. Again, there's no real evidence to back this up, but that hasn't really stopped David Icke from making a whole career based off of it. For the next one, we have the Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm is a large intestine worm that is believed to exist in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia. However, due to the remoteness of the desert, reported sightings are actually rare, and no evidence has ever been presented to prove its existence. This worm is believed to be red-skinned, with a large circular mouth filled with sharp teeth, and is actually very dangerous for humans. This whole worm seems very similar to the sandworms that you see in Dune, in the sense that they both live in deserts, they're both very dangerous, and quite revered. Again, there's really no evidence to back up that these even exist, so just like everything before, this is just an urban legend. I know some people might be a little bit disappointed that none of this stuff is true. It is pretty interesting, but unfortunately, it's just a tall tale. For our last entry in Tier 1, we have the killer in the back seat. So this is a reference to a story that's actually been around for quite a while. It usually involves a woman driving alone at night. While she's driving, she usually notices that someone is behind her. This person usually comes up very close to her car and starts flashing their lights, honking their horn, and swerving all over the road. The woman at this point gets quite frightened. She's not exactly sure who this is. Is this someone trying to run her off the road? She's not exactly sure. The story usually ends by her reaching the destination of her home, or some gas station or some other place that she was able to find refuge in. Turns out that the driver behind her was actually honking his horn and flashing his lights because there was a killer in her back seat. Apparently when he flashed his lights, the killer would actually duck down, being scared. Usually when she gets to their destination, at this point, either the killer runs away, gets arrested, or actually ends up killing her and the driver that was trying to help her. There are other versions of this story where instead of there being a driver behind her, it usually involves her going to a gas station and someone at the gas station sees that there's someone hiding in the back seat and usually kind of convinces her to get out so they can help her. But again, just like everything else before, there's no evidence to back this up. Not to say that there aren't examples of people actually hiding in back seats. Stories of this nature where there's someone hiding in the back seat and there's like another driver following, this has never really happened. There's really no indications or really any stories that I personally could find. So again, the urban legend, or at least the way the story is told in this urban legend, is certainly not true. So now we're going to move into Tier 2. Now at this point, we're going to start getting a little bit deeper into it. In fact, we're actually at the water level, but we're not really in there yet. We're just tipping our toes in the water. Things are going to get a little bit crazier, a little bit creepier, but it shouldn't be anything too crazy at this point. So let's get right into it. For our first one, we have the water bomber and the scuba diver. So this urban legend has been around since at least the 80s. Essentially the idea is that a scuba diver actually gets picked up by a water bomber and gets dropped over a forest fire. And later on, the body of the scuba diver is actually discovered, charred and dead. Now water bombers are planes that are specifically designed to fight forest fires. They have the ability to fly low over bodies of water and scoop up large amounts of water quickly. This water is then dropped over forest fires. Again, this urban legend essentially states that there have been cases where someone was out in the lake, maybe they were underwater so they couldn't be seen, hence the scuba diver, and the pilots of the water bomber accidentally scoop up the scuba diver and drop him off the forest fire. Now there are different variations of the story, some that involve helicopters with water buckets, but regardless, it's usually the same idea overall. But again, unfortunately, or probably fortunately, this isn't actually real. There are no documented cases of anyone being scooped up by a water bomber or a helicopter. In fact, it wouldn't even be possible. The water is actually taken into the plane through an intake that is usually 4 inches by 10 inches. This is far too small, even for a child. The helicopter buckets, on the other hand, actually use small hoses to scoop up the water. Again, both methods would make it impossible to get a human into there. So again, this isn't true, but it is pretty interesting and definitely clever. For the next one, we have the babysitter and the man upstairs. So this legend is actually quite similar to the one about the clown statue. This one also involves a babysitter who is alone in a house with 2 children that are already asleep. But instead of there being a clown, this babysitter actually starts to get some strange calls. Strange calls that keep asking her to go upstairs and check on the children. Now the girl at first tries to ignore these calls, but the calls keep coming. And eventually, she starts to get a little bit scared and actually calls the police. The police eventually trace the call and discover that the call is actually coming from inside the house. They tell the girl and tell her to get out of there immediately. As she's running out, she notices that the door on the top of the stairs is starting to open and that someone is coming out. Now this story usually ends with the babysitter escaping and the man upstairs getting arrested. Turns out that he was actually hiding up there after he'd already murdered the children. He was calling her to come upstairs so that he could kill her as well. When I was doing the research, it was actually based off of a real event, a murder that occurred back in 1950. It's not really a 1-to-1 situation, but there was a real event that occurred in 1950 where a girl by the name of Janet Kreisman was actually killed while she was babysitting. She was babysitting a child and was actually murdered by a man who broke into the house that she was at. Now this story is a little bit different from the urban legend in the sense that there's no records of her being called, and also in this story the babysitter was killed and the children were actually safe. However, there would actually be one phone call where Janet actually managed to quickly call the police. But unfortunately, all the police would hear was screaming and Janet yelling, "Come quick." They weren't really able to get the address and they were also unable to trace the call. So unfortunately, they couldn't really get there in time. The parents of the child that she was babysitting would eventually return to the house and noted that Janet was dead, but their son was still alive. They would call the police themselves. Now if you're actually interested, I actually made a full-on deep dive into the urban legend and the real-life murder that inspired it. If you're interested, you can go on my channel and check out the video. For the next one, we have the Kelly-Hopkinsville Encounter. Now this is actually an alleged encounter of extraterrestrials that happened back in 1955 near the towns of Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky. More specifically, on the evening of August 21st, 1955, a group of adults and children would actually arrive at their local police station, claiming that aliens had actually invaded their farm. They would claim that these aliens actually arrived in a spaceship and landed on their property and then started to attack them. Apparently, this family had been holding off the aliens with guns, and apparently for the last few hours had been having a full-on gun battle. The idea of farmers in a rural area having a shootout with aliens doesn't really get any more cooler and American than that. Anyways, apparently the claim was that there were upwards of 12 to 15 aliens attacking the farm. Now the police eventually did decide to go to the farm, not because they believed there were aliens there, but they were actually afraid that there was an actual gun battle going on, and they wanted to stop it before too many people got killed. Once they arrived at the farmhouse, they would find really no evidence of aliens. However, they did actually find evidence of a gun battle happening. Bullet holes and casings could actually be found all over the property. So there definitely was a gun battle, but we're not exactly sure with whom. However, further investigations will bring up absolutely no evidence to prove that aliens had attacked this farm, despite the claims from the local farmers. It is believed that the farmers might have actually mistaken great horned owls in the local area for aliens, as they are nocturnal and have yellow eyes. Also, it was reported that there was actually a meteor shower going on during that time, so it is possible they could have mistaken one of those for an alien ship. Regardless, this is actually one of the most famous and coolest alien encounters in American history. Again, this urban legend, I can't really say for sure that it's fake, but again, there's really no evidence to back it up. For our next urban legend, we have Bloody Mary. Now this is an urban legend that you've probably heard of. It's actually pretty famous and quite well known. Again, there have been many legends about this for a long time, movies, stories, you name it. And if you ever had a sleepover or just been at home alone at night, I'm pretty sure someone probably dared you to do this Bloody Mary thing. So this whole legend is about something called Bloody Mary. It's believed to be some sort of a ghost or a spirit that arrives if you stare into a mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times. There are different variations, but mostly when she appears, there's usually a couple of things she does. If you're lucky, she'll give you a wish, but most likely, most of the stories usually indicate that she'll kill you. Quite a pretty big difference between those 2 variations, but that's usually how a lot of these stories go. No one truly knows who Bloody Mary is based off of, but the most famous candidate is Mary I of England, who was actually the Queen of England during the mid-1500s. She's known for being a very bloody monarch, who was very fiercely Catholic, and she prosecuted English Protestants to a very extreme extent, and burning hundreds at the stake. And because of all these killings, she was given the title of Bloody Mary. Now there's no evidence to prove this urban legend like actually all the urban legends that we've talked about so far, but this definitely is probably in the top 5 most famous urban legends of all time. Next one, we have the death of Gloria Ramirez. Gloria Ramirez was actually a woman from Southern California who one day was rushed into a hospital after suffering serious health problems related to her heart. She was sent to emergency, and doctors and nurses would begin to operate on her immediately. But once they began, they would start to notice some strange things. She had a strange, oily sheen on her skin, and her breath smelled like garlic. Her blood contained manila-colored particles, and the tube with the blood smelled like ammonia. Eventually, some of the staff would actually start to feel nauseous and lightheaded, and some of them would even begin to faint. This would end up causing quite a panic in the hospital, as many believed that there might be some sort of a gas leak or something else that was going on. The whole hospital, including doctors, nurses, and patients, would actually all be evacuated. All of them, except for Gloria, who would actually remain in the hospital with a skeleton crew of doctors and nurses who would continue to watch over her. Unfortunately, Gloria would actually later pass on due to kidney failure. Now, ever since this occurred, there have actually been many different urban legends trying to explain this, many claiming that this might have been some sort of supernatural event, that Gloria herself was possessed, or that she was some sort of a biological weapon. But the real truth is actually a lot more tragic than that. It turns out that Gloria had cancer for which there was really no treatment. And because of this, Gloria would turn to more traditional and pseudo-medicine, trying to cure herself. It was later revealed that her breath smelled strange, and that she had those strange particles in her blood due to the alternative medicine that she was trying to take. The fainting and the lightheadedness that people were feeling was actually due to gases that were being released from Gloria. Apparently, all this different medicine that she was taking had actually reacted inside her body and created these toxic fumes. So at the end of the day, this isn't really an urban legend. All the tales about her are actually false. Apparently, the real story, which is actually very tragic, is that this was a very desperate woman who was suffering from cancer. Knowing that there was nothing that regular science could do, she decided to take extreme measures to save herself. And unfortunately, she would end up killing herself in the process. For the next legend, we have the evil farming game. It was believed that there was a game similar to Harvest Moon, where you control a farmer, and in this game, you pretty much manage the farm. However, the evil farming game had a twist. In this game, your farmer is actually a murderer, and he murders his own wife, and actually hides her body. And throughout this entire game, not only are you trying to manage your farm, but you're actually trying to hide the body of your wife, while investigators such as police and other people around you are actually snooping around. Now, this game is definitely one of the most interesting premises that I've heard of. News of this game actually first came from a Reddit user named Sparta213. He claimed remembering this game, playing it in the early 2000s. He didn't really remember the exact details of it, but he did remember that it came out sometime in the early 2000s. Once he made this post, people all across the internet would actually try searching for this game, as many people were intrigued by the premise. And many people actually believed that this game might actually be lost media. However, no evidence would actually ever be found. And later on, another Reddit user would actually find a clip from a stream of a streamer known as Vinesauce Joel. And apparently in this stream, Joel himself was playing Harvest Moon and actually made up a hypothetical game that he would like to see, one in which the farmer wasn't just farming, but was also murdering people and then hiding their bodies on the farm. The Reddit user Sparta213 would actually eventually watch this clip and confirm that this is definitely the origins of this story. Apparently, he had actually been watching this stream and had later on gone to sleep and had a dream about the game. So the story wasn't true, but there are actually people out there that still remember playing this game and still are continuing to search for it. But most people at this point have come to the conclusion that it's not real and that the true origin was actually this stream. But again, it actually hasn't stopped a lot of people from searching for it, and the search still continues to this day. But from everything that I can see, this urban legend is certainly false. For the next one, we have the Mandela Effect. This is actually a famous phenomenon where a large group of people remember certain memories that are actually false and can't be backed up. These false memories might be about some historical event or maybe even a TV show. This effect itself is actually named after Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa. Many people had originally believed that Mandela had actually died in the 80s, but in reality, he died in 2013. Many people believe that the memory of Mandela dying back in the 1980s was actually a false memory that had been implanted in people, and therefore, this whole effect was named after him. Another famous example was the whole controversy around the Berenstain Bears. A lot of people actually remember the Berenstain Bears being spelled with an EIN at the end and not an AIN, or Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back saying, "Luke, I am your father," when in reality he actually said, "No, I am your father." A lot of people believe that their original memories that they had must be real, and they've actually come up with explanations believing that this might be evidence of parallel universes or alternate dimensions that are actually leaking into our world, and thereby implanting people with false memories that are false in our world, but actually real in these other dimensions. So essentially, we're remembering things from alternate realities, and these memories are then being mixed with our real world. or even that things in our world are actually being changed by these alternate realities. Again, there's no real evidence to back this up. This is mostly just an urban legend that people made up for fun and then kind of got carried away with it. But again, from what I can see, there's really no scientific evidence or anything. Though there are many people that believe in parallel universes, the Mandela Effect itself is unproven. For the next one, we have the Denver International Airport. Now you might be thinking, what exactly is the urban legend here? I mean, it's an airport. Could there be a haunted terminal, a haunted plane, maybe something else? Well, actually, the urban legend is the airport itself. This urban legend has actually been the source of conspiracy theories for quite a while. A famous source, one in which even infamous conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones have commented on it. So the reason why this urban legend exists around this airport is actually because of the strange art, architecture, and some construction issues, and the whole layout of the airport itself. So this airport actually contains a lot of tunnels underground throughout the entire airport, and many people believe that these tunnels might be used by governments and are connected to bunkers or nuclear shelters, or they might contain facilities hiding alien bodies. There's also a plaque at this place that contains the Freemason symbol, and people believe that because of the connection of Freemasons, underground tunnels, and much of other stuff, that this airport is somehow linked to the New World Order. There's also a blue Mustang up front with blue skin and red eyes. It looks pretty demonic, and many people believe that it might be a reference to one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. But of course, like most of the urban legends, very little evidence has actually been presented. From everything that we actually know, these tunnels are strictly used for airport reasons. You know, being used to move people and luggage around. Absolutely no connection to any sort of government bunker. Also, the plaque itself with the Freemasons is real, but again, there's no evidence to prove that the Freemasons were even involved in the construction or have any control of the airport operations. The blue horse itself is actually a reference to Mustangs, wild horses. Since Colorado itself is considered a gateway to the west, they thought there wouldn't really be a better symbol than a wild Mustang to represent the airport. Again, there's no evidence of aliens or government bunkers or really any conspiracy theory here. For our last tier 2 urban legend, we have Area 51. Now, you probably definitely heard of this one. Area 51 is a highly classified, secretive US Air Force base in Nevada. It was created in 1955 and is commonly thought to develop and test experimental aircraft and other weapon systems. Many famous aircraft such as the U-2, F-117, and the F-22 have been developed and tested at this base. However, due to the highly secretive nature of this base, many different conspiracy theories have developed around it, with people believing that alien craft and alien bodies might be held at this facility and are being currently tested on. It's also believed that the US government is using the technology from these alien craft to design military aircrafts for its own uses, and a bunch of other alien technology is also apparently being worked on. Not exactly sure why they would do all this stuff at the same base. Maybe it might be a better idea to spread it out a little bit, but those are the theories. Area 51 itself would actually acquire a lot of attention in 2019 when an event on Facebook about storming Area 51 actually went viral. People would actually end up showing up, but no one actually stormed the base. Instead, people just hung out and had some fun. And for some reason, North Korea was there. I guess they thought they might be able to sneak in. There have been many high-profile people like Bob Lazar that have claimed to have worked at Area 51 on alien spacecraft. Again, there's really no evidence to prove that aliens are here or anything supernatural. All we have is personal testimonies of people that have claimed to have been at Area 51. If you want to know more, I would highly recommend checking out the Joe Rogan podcast, in which Bob Lazar was actually a guest, where he explains his full story. But again, from everything I can see, there's really no evidence to back this up.